Good morning, I'm Adam Sexton. The high cost of housing and the lack of affordable options is putting the Granite State in a real bind. The New Hampshire House has organized a new special committee to try to work on solutions to this problem. Joining us this morning to discuss is the chairman of that committee, Representative Joe Alexander of Goffstown, and Rob Dapis of New Hampshire Housing, the CEO there. So thank you for joining us, gentlemen.
Thank you for having us.
Let's start with you, Representative Alexander. Your committee work is still in process, but one of the biggest issues the House has wrestled with for a while is trying to balance this idea of finding a statewide solution that still respects local control, local zoning, local planning. How do you thread that needle?
Well, Adam, I wish I could say there was a silver bullet to this, and I want to thank the Speaker for his leadership, because giving the House an opportunity to evaluate this on our own merits is a great start. He came into the Housing Committee right at the first meeting and said there's no silver bullet, but have at it and have in the stakeholders and see what we can come up with. So we've had 2 full days of listening sessions. We brought in various stakeholders. I mean, we started with the New Hampshire Realtors, so they kind of gave us a lay of the land. But other than that, we're kind of all ears at this point and trying to come up with maybe a couple small policy solutions.
Such as?
So, I mean, I was looking specifically myself, there's 10 members of this committee, but I was looking at code enforcement, the fact that, you know, you need multiple inspections for the same property. So kind of streamlining those specific things may be helpful. We also got a lot more tools. So for instance, St. Anselm College is releasing on, I believe, May 9th, zoning atlas that will give towns the opportunity to look at their zoning relative to other towns. So it's a really great resource that I think will help inform the committee and inform towns.
Rob, from your perspective, what's the most important thing the legislature needs to do to try to address this problem? Or do you see this as a fight that needs to be fought on the more local and municipal level?
Both. You know, as the representative said, there's no one silver bullet, and I think the investments that the legislature is making, the House made an amendment to the budget and passed a budget with $30 million for the Affordable Housing Fund yesterday. That's an important and exciting step forward, but certainly action is also needed at the local level. And you know, I think the timing here is good, because sometimes municipalities recognize there's a problem, but they're not sure how to solve it, and so having resources not only to update their zoning ordinances, but then to help create affordable housing is really important.
You talk about that $30 million in the budget. To the layman, what does that money do? Where does that go?
So that goes to the Affordable Housing Fund, which New Hampshire Housing administers and invests in cooperation and collaboration with a lot of federal funding sources to create affordable rental housing, and perhaps also some opportunities for home ownership too.
Representative Alexander, there's always the concern that more development will change the fundamental character of New Hampshire that so many people treasure, that, you know, the rural feel to this state. Is there a way to assuage fears in a legislative solution for those rural areas and those suburban towns that will allow development to be right-sized and you don't end up with sort of the mega developments that so many people fear?
Well, and I think some of the concern is the pressure on school districts. I mean, in Goffstown, we don't have that declining enrollment. I mean, everybody wants to come to Goffstown schools for a reason. So the pressure is the school district. I mean, there's a great project that we got a presentation on from Dover. I think Rob can give a better example of it, but they're smaller units, maybe just for 1 or 2 people, and there's really no opportunity to have a long-term pressure on the school district.
What do you think about that, Rob? Is there a way to right-size the development so it can happen in more places? I know Governor Sununu has talked about, hey, we don't want to do these epic things. We want to do a little here, a little there to solve this statewide.
Sure. Well, there are places where a big development makes sense, and there's places where it doesn't. And so the cottages at Back River Road that John and Maggie Randolph are developing in Dover that the representative mentioned are a great example of tiny units. And there are so many more households in New Hampshire that consist of 1 or 2 people. A lot of those people are living in big houses that they don't want to live in anymore, but they don't have other good options. So creating options for everybody is really important.
Let's talk about the rental vacancy rate right now. It's still under 1%, which is crazy, but that's happening all over the country, really. If you could snap your fingers and change that and get some development going right now, it still feels like it would take a long time to solve. So Representative Alexander, how long do you see this taking to get to a point where we're back to that 5% vacancy rate, which is considered balanced?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball, but what I will say is that there's been a lot of pressure on landlords, especially I sit on House Judiciary. There were a lot of attacks on landlords recently. There was one bill that would require, if a unit was renovated, it couldn't go on the market for another year after renovation if you evicted a tenant based on renovation. So there are a lot of attacks on landlords. That's not our solution, right? We want to look at a supply side solution. So things that Rob outlined in the Affordable Housing Fund. I mean, this year is all about bipartisanship. We put in $30 million from the House budget over to the Senate for the Affordable Housing Fund. So there's things that we can do on a bipartisan way that would help solve the crisis. But again, we don't want to look at more regulation on landlords and what they can and can't do on their own property. We want to make sure that we are providing them with tools and resources, but we're not giving them mandates.
So I think what I'm hearing here is took a while to get in, might take a while to get out. Rob, your perspective, how long will it take to turn the ship around here?
It's going to take some time. It's going to take years before we're in a truly balanced market, and I think it's important to acknowledge that, but I think it's important to know that we can start now. The legislature's taking action, the governor's on board and is leading on this issue. I think for the municipalities to step up now, the timing is good.
And a big goal for New Hampshire is to hold on to folks like you, Representative Alexander, who are younger Granite Staters. How does this fit in with that mission? And of course, you know, a lot of people are stuck at home right now because of the high cost of housing. How important is it to solve this problem to maintain or retain New Hampshire's youth?
Well, that's specifically the problem, because, you know, there's so many businesses that are crying out that they need employees, but they just don't have anywhere to live. And, you know, I'm a full-time bartender by trade, and, you know, we're looking at people like people in the service industry can't work. We can't find cooks for our job because we don't have anywhere for them to live. So it's a multifaceted problem, but the solution to housing and trying to find more housing for people, supply side dynamic and solving that side will definitely help alleviate the problem.
Rob, your perspective on this, you know, I know people try to hire these days and they get them on board and then the person can't find a place to live.
Yep.
Right. I think that's why you're seeing the business community, the Business and Industry Association has been very vocal. Stay Work Play, which you know, has really adopted housing as one of its issues because they hear from not only employers but people who want to stay in the state and they're having trouble finding a place to live that they can afford.
Representative Alexander, one of the big fights recently on the House floor was over these accessory dwelling units or infill housing. What's your perspective on that? Because that's one way to add a little bit more that doesn't involve necessarily building up in a big way on land that's not already developed.
Well, and we're looking at accessory dwelling units. I think that there were some parts of that bill that I didn't necessarily like, but there were some parts that we were looking at the merits of it, and, you know, there are good things to it. So I'm happy that we tabled that bill, so we allowed more opportunity for the Housing Committee to look into it. So I would say, I mean, ADUs, they get one by right in a town, but part of the other bill would allow maybe another one. The problem is that there's a little bit of a clash with the towns because the towns can require, for instance, how many parking spaces an ADU needs to have. So if the towns require that an ADU needs 2 parking spaces and it's only a 1-bedroom ADU, it doesn't quite make sense. So we're kind of looking at different parts of that bill and seeing what we can pick out of it that would help. Rob,
your perspective, is infill, how much of the solution is that going to be?
I mean, it's hard to say exactly what % of the solution is going to be, but it's definitely an important piece of it. And again, it provides an opportunity for smaller households, you know, 1 or 2 people who need a place to live, a reasonable opportunity to stay in the community that they love.
Right. Certainly, if a younger worker is to get out of mom and dad's basement, that might be the thing.
Well, and it doesn't put a pressure on the school districts again, right? I mean, it's a solution where the school districts aren't necessarily affected if you have a 1-bedroom ADU unit. You know, so.
As we wrap up here, I'm curious for your perspective. What is the consequence of doing nothing? What if the legislature doesn't pass anything? What if towns keep maintaining the way they're going for certain places that don't want development? If they don't want it, that's fine. But what are the consequences if nothing gets done, Representative Alexander?
Well, so I studied public policy at UNH, and the study of public policy is what government should or should not do. And when Granite Staters are asking us to do something to help solve this housing crisis, I think this is a situation where government needs to do something to help. So we started with the $30 million out of the House budget, but also the Speaker setting up the special committee. I'm very optimistic that we're going to have some policy solutions that I think we can get, you know, the 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans on the committee on board with.
Rob, how about you? What are the consequences if the legislature doesn't get anything done?
Well, I share the representative's optimism, but I'll say more action is needed at both the state and local level, and I think failing to do more would mean, you know, we're already experiencing economic consequences and humanitarian consequences of the supply-demand imbalance in the housing market, and those are going to get more severe if we don't do something.
All right. Rob Dappes and Representative Joe Alexander, thanks for discussing this issue. Maybe we'll have you back, hopefully, when this problem is solved. We'll see. It's going to be a while. Thank you.